History is often written as a series of accidents, but once in a millennium, history creates a strategist so brilliant that his mind becomes the blueprint for every empire that follows. His name was Alexander of Macedon. To the world, he is the Great, but to the generals of the modern era, he is something more, the first modern commander. At just 20 years old, Alexander inherited a kingdom that was on the verge of collapse. Macedon was a rugged, mountainous land, long dismissed by the sophisticated city-states of Athens and Sparta as a barbarian backwater. His father, Philip II, had been a brilliant reformer who transformed a disorganized militia into a professional fighting force. But his assassination left a power vacuum that invited every enemy of Macedon to strike. The world expected Alexander to fail. They expected him to be a footnote. They did not realize that this boy had been tutored by Aristotle, the greatest mind of the age, and trained in the saddle by the toughest veterans in Europe. Alexander didn't just want to defend his borders, he wanted to dissolve them. By the age of 32, he had forged the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen, stretching from the fog-swept mountains of Greece to the humid jungles of India. He didn't win because he had the biggest army. In fact, he was almost always outnumbered. He didn't win because of luck. He won because he viewed the world through the lens of logic, geometry, and psychological dominance. Today, we break down the definitive tactical masterclass of Alexander the Great. Chapter 1. The Education of a Conqueror. Before we look at the battles, we must look at the mind. Alexander's genius was not accidental, it was manufactured. While other princes were learning only how to hunt and feast, Alexander was being schooled by Aristotle in the Mieza groves. Aristotle didn't just teach him philosophy, he taught him classification. He taught him how to look at a chaotic system, whether it was a biological organism or a political state, and break it down into its component parts. This is the secret to Alexander's military success. He didn't see an army as a giant mass of men. He saw it as a series of biological and mechanical systems. He looked for the brain of the enemy, the commander, the limbs, the cavalry, and the lungs, the supply lines. This scientific approach allowed him to remain calm when faced with overwhelming numbers. At the Battle of the Granicus, his first major encounter with Persian forces, his generals advised caution. The river was deep, the banks were steep, and the Persians held the high ground. But Alexander understood the physics of momentum. He knew that if he struck with enough velocity at a single point, the static Persian line would shatter regardless of its size. He plunged into the river, nearly lost his life to a Persian axe, but proved his first major theorem: audacity backed by precision creates its own luck. Chapter 2. Move number 1. The Oblique Strike, Gaugamela. By 331 BC, Alexander had already defeated the Persians twice, but King Darius III was far from finished. Darius had spent 2 years assembling a super army. He drew men from every corner of his vast empire: Scythian horsemen, Indian elephant corps, and the elite immortals. The location was Gaugamela. Darius had chosen this ground because it was a vast, flat plain. He even went as far as to level the earth with his own engineers to ensure his scythed chariots with literal blades attached to the wheels, could run at full speed. Darius had over 200,000 men. Alexander had 47,000. The psychological chess match. On the night before the battle, Alexander's second-in-command, Parmenion, suggested a night attack. He argued that the only way to beat such numbers was under the cover of darkness. Alexander famously replied, "I will not steal my victory." This wasn't just arrogance, it was strategy. If he defeated Darius at night, Darius would simply claim it was a fluke and raise another army. He needed to defeat Darius in daylight, on the ground Darius had chosen, to break the Persian spirit forever. The execution of the Oblique Strike. As the battle began, Alexander did something that baffled the Persian scouts. He didn't move forward. He began to lead his right wing of cavalry in a diagonal line, moving toward the edge of the leveled battlefield. Darius panicked. If Alexander moved off the flattened ground, the scythed chariots would be useless. To stop him, Darius ordered his left-wing cavalry to move parallel to Alexander, trying to outflank him. This is the oblique movement. By moving diagonally, Alexander forced the Persian line to stretch. In physics, when you stretch a material, it becomes thin. The same is true for an army. As the Persian cavalry moved to keep up with Alexander's gallop, a gap, a seam opened in the Persian center. The wedge. Alexander had been waiting for this exact millisecond. He instantly wheeled his cavalry around, forming a massive V-shape or wedge. He didn't attack the soldiers. He aimed the point of that wedge directly at King Darius's chariot. Imagine the terror. You are the king of the world, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of men, and suddenly, through a gap in your own lines, a screaming mass of Macedonian steel is flying directly at your throat. Darius saw the lion of Macedon coming for him, and he did the one thing a king must never do. He turned and fled. The moment the royal standard dipped and the king's chariot vanished into the dust, the Persian army, the largest force on earth, ceased to exist as an army. It became a panicked crowd. Alexander proved that a head can be severed from even the largest body. Chapter 3. Move number 2. The Science of the Phalanx. To understand how Alexander could take such risks with his cavalry, we must understand the anvil. This was the Macedonian Phalanx. For centuries, Greek warfare was dominated by the hoplite, men with 8-foot spears and large shields. It was a tug of war. But Alexander's father, Philip II, had revolutionized this. He gave his men the sarissa, a 20-foot pike made of flexible ash wood with a heavy iron tip. The Wall of Death. The phalanx was organized into 16 by 16 blocks. The first 5 ranks held their spears horizontally. This meant that any enemy trying to reach the Macedonian line had to pass through 5 layers of spearheads before they could even reach a shield. It was a living porcupine. But the phalanx had a weakness. It was slow and couldn't turn easily. If an enemy got to the side or the rear, the phalanx was doomed. This is where Alexander's genius for combined arms comes in. The hammer and the anvil. Alexander never used the phalanx to win the battle. He used it as the anvil. He would position the phalanx in the center to engage the main body of the enemy. The enemy would get stuck against the wall of pikes. They couldn't move forward and they couldn't move back. While the enemy was pinned, Alexander would use his light infantry, the agrianes, and his archers to harass the enemy flanks. Finally, the hammer, the companion cavalry, would deliver the killing blow to the rear or side. This was the first time in history that different types of troops, heavy infantry, light infantry, and cavalry, were used in a perfectly synchronized ecosystem. Alexander was the conductor of a lethal orchestra. He understood that a battle isn't a brawl, it's a mechanical process of pinning and striking. Chapter 4. The Siege of Tyre, Engineering the Impossible. If Gaugamela showed his tactical mind and the phalanx showed his organizational mind, the Siege of Tyre in 332 BC showed his logistical mind. Tyre was an ancient Phoenician city built on an island half a mile off the coast of modern Lebanon. It was the New York City of the ancient world, wealthy, arrogant, and protected by the most powerful navy in the Mediterranean. Its walls were 150 feet high.
The Tyrians were so confident they could ignore Alexander that when he asked to enter the city to offer a sacrifice to his ancestor, Hercules, his envoys were killed and thrown off the walls. They thought the sea was an impassable moat. Reshaping the earth. Alexander didn't have a navy, so he decided to build a road. He ordered his army to gather stones from the ruins of Old Tyre on the mainland and timber from the mountains of Lebanon. They began building a mole, a massive land bridge 200 feet wide, stretching into the sea toward the island. The Tyrians were horrified. They sent ships to rain fire on the workers. They sent divers to sabotage the foundations. In response, Alexander built the two